All right, Eric gave us a fantastic presentation yesterday. A lot of interaction, and so yesterday was a retrospective, and then today is more prospective. And so I'm going to hand it over to Eric.
Right. Way to set that up. All right. So today, I had this presentation all set like a month ago when we first started setting up GDevCon NA. And then 3 days before we got on the plane, Matthew had this great idea and said, how about we just rewrite the whole presentation and do something completely different? So here we go. All right. I'm going to start off with Fab should be here, and I'm definitely going to honor. And I've always had a slide like this in my deck. Our giants are female. This one I want to talk about is Kristen Hadid. We had the opportunity to meet her this year. It was all virtual, of course, but she presented at a leadership series at NI, and I thought she was fascinating. So at 19, she founded a company, and the company ended up hiring 400 people. They're all students. They were working on cleaning houses. She was just trying to, she'll talk about this if you go to her website. She was trying to buy a pair of jeans that she couldn't afford. She was trying to find a way to make money. She started cleaning houses. People really liked what she was doing. She started running a business, and it all just took off from there. So then in 2012, she started talking about leadership opportunities because one of the things she learned is in the home cleaning business, you have a very high turnover rate. And she found that out the hard way when she had 75 employees and 45 of them all walked out on the same day. Cool. So then she wrote a book in 2017. Now this is where things got really fascinating. The book's called Permission to Screw Up, and the subtitle says, How I Learned to Lead by Doing Almost Everything Wrong. And all of the rest of her presentation was very closely aligned. Only when they got to this point did I understand why did we invite her to come and talk to a leadership series. And this was all about how we do things more agile. Make sure you're doing, and then you're evaluating and learning from that and applying it and changing and moving on. And so she said, hey, look, this is how I run all my businesses now. And then in 2021, she's transitioning her Student Made company, which was a home cleaning business, into Student Made, spelled M-A-D-E, which is about teaching students how to become the future leaders. And she has this quote on her website that I shamelessly pulled that says, I want to see a world in which students learn resiliency, courage, confidence, and compassion. It's really cool. And I wish her all the best of luck. And she was a really interesting and engaging speaker for us. So if you have the chance, I included her website on here. Go look her up. All right. The session, despite the fact that Matthew and I completely changed the session like 3 days beforehand, all of these people helped me put all of this content together. So just like yesterday's session, I can't take all the credit. So again, if you love it, email these people. If you hate it, come talk to me. I'm not going to go through this slide because we really delved into this yesterday, but if there's anybody who's not clear on what we did with LabVIEW NXG at the end of 2020, you weren't paying attention yesterday, you can come talk to me later. All right, so this is where things go massively off the rails. What I had planned is to talk about LabVIEW 2021, its features, and where we go from here, and everybody in this room was really excited to hear that, right? Okay, well, I'm not going to do that at all. Here's the URL. You can go watch Daniel do the demo of everything that we had in LabVIEW NXG 2021, and I'm going to spend the rest of the time talking about everything else we want to do. So I'm just going to take for granted that you've all seen LabVIEW 2020. If you haven't, I'm here until like noon tomorrow. You can come find me somewhere at the hotel, and we can spend a lot of time doing demos on my laptop. All right, so there are some things that I'm going to set up, but 90% of what we're going to do in here is going to be survey-based using the tool from yesterday. So if you don't have your phone or your laptop out, I suggest doing that now because we're going to be using that same poll EV software that we used yesterday, and everything is going to be an interactive discussion based on the polls. But I want to make sure that we talked a little bit about some of the setup. So some of the setup here, the LabVIEW NXG web module is now the G-Web development software. I just want to make sure that everybody's clear. That is not a LabVIEW module. That is a standalone product. It'll work with lots of different technologies. Its purpose is for building thin client interfaces for your test and measurement applications for people who don't want to go get a background on how to build web pages. If you want to get a background on how to build web pages or hire those developers, there are lots of other tools that are way more powerful to use for creating web interfaces. All right, we also want to talk about Linux. So long history of NI, we've been a really big, strong, dominant player on Windows machines. LabVIEW, on the other hand, has had both a Linux and Mac OS variants for a long time. But right now, NI is in the process of converting nearly all of its software interfaces to be dual interfaced on both Windows and Linux. So the current roadmap, we have everything. We've gotten most of the drivers. By the end of this year, most of the drivers will all exist as a Linux interface and as a Windows interface. Starting in 2022, right now we're exploring how do we do things like LabVIEW RT and FPGA from a Linux desktop. That's for like I want to do development on a Linux desktop and deploy to a Linux RT target. And then we're looking at like how do we transition things like Veristand, System Link, TestStand, and the rest of our app software platform. Now, I will put a caveat around things that are in the future. Just like our CFO will tell you, that's forward looking. You can't hold me accountable for it later, and I will deny it if it doesn't actually happen. All right. The last thing that I want to mention before we get into the poll software, if you've used Macs anytime during your career and you know what that is, raise your hand. All right. Everybody definitely wants to see us port Macs over to Linux. Yep. Oh, Norm's up here nodding his head if you want to like smack him later. Okay, we're not going to do that. We're actually writing a completely new utility that's going to do all of our hardware configuration on Linux. Because it's new, we're going to build it there first on Linux, and then we're going to backport it to Windows. So we will eventually replace Macs on Windows as well. It'll be a much better interface. We're showing you it's not just a pipe dream. We've actually built most of it. So this is live images of what that software will look like. And it'll support everything that we support on Linux. All right, I lied. I added one more slide in here. Okay, how many people are building installers today using LabVIEW's? Okay, interface, great. How many of you are actually building that as a package-based installer today? 2 of you. Okay, so this is the need right here. We will be deprecating building installers. That's all based on Windows MSI technology that doesn't port at all to Linux. So if you were trying to build dual OS things, it already didn't work. Packages, however, are somewhat more ubiquitous. JKI's VI Package Manager works flawlessly on both Windows and Linux systems. It also works on Mac, but we're only going to talk about Linux and Windows right now. So we're in the process of transitioning all of our technologies from what you can do today to build Windows installers to building packages and package-based installers. NI, for its part, has been releasing all of its software as package-based installers for the last 3 years. And we want to engage everybody in a workflow. So this is the first of our questions of if you're interested in this workflow, you're building installers, and you want to talk about the ways these two things are going to be different, because there's quite a bit of differences, put your name here. And there's a whole different team at NI that I'm going to engage you with, but we're going to spin up a whole conversation specifically on this technology. And I will give everybody a chance to fill in this survey before I force you into the next question. The nice part is once you've loaded this page, all of the other questions I'm about to ask will all come up on this same page, so you don't have to do any other changes. So just load it once and it'll keep cycling through the questions. I learned an important lesson yesterday. I gave you guys the opportunity I did not turn a certain feature off in here. There are not 118 people in the room, but somehow I got 118 surveys submitted last night. So I redid some of these questions. Hopefully I won't have that same problem today. I am going to roughly wait until we have at least 50. Yeah, go ahead. Questions while we're waiting.
Is there going to be a focus on making the builds more reliable, especially with... I am not smart enough to figure this out.
I know that's been a real problem all day. There's a button on the bottom. Yep,
Okay,
that's it.
All right. So, is there going to be a focus on making builds more reliable, and or at least making build errors more useful?
Right, so that's 2 different questions, so I'm going to answer them differently. The build errors is actually a LabVIEW functionality of how we propagate errors in the app builder interface. I think we should talk about that. So all of it will come out in these discussions, but some of it is specific to LabVIEW, and then some of it, like we're going to make builds more reliable. It kind of depends on where the build failure is. Sometimes that's LabVIEW, and sometimes that's the MSI engine underneath, which we're getting rid of. And then sometimes it could be the package manager interface, which we'll be adding. So I want to say yes, but like that's the nature of the discussion of like help us figure out, like as we make this transition, we've figured out how to make it work because we've been doing this for the last 3 years, but we need to figure out where is everybody else struggling, or why. Specifically, the question is going to start with why isn't everybody building package-based installers right now? And so we'll start from that fundamental point and then we'll kind of work forward. So to Jim's question yesterday, how are we engaging the community? We're not even making this change until we've had a discussion with most of the people who represent the community so we can figure out what workflows we need to make better as we look at what we're doing. In the back.
So it went by kind of fast and might have been on there, but I didn't quite catch if you were going to be expanding Linux support, or at least Linux installation support beyond just the RPM style package installers.
Right, that's a great question, which I'm going to entirely punt on for the moment.
Okay.
But his question for the Austin team, just so you guys can hear me, he was asking, are we going to make the Linux-based installation experience more robust, more full-featured? Yeah, okay. All right, I have 26 done and 22 underway. I'm not really sure what I'm looking at here. Yep. There is no question. Enter your name if you want to be included in that discussion. If you don't want to be included, then you can skip the survey. Is everybody who wants to enter their name done entering their name? Yeah? Your phone crashes. Lovely. Where? Yeah, there. Give her a different app. That one I can't fix because it's not our service. This is a third-party company which usually works very well. That's the first time I've ever seen something that crashed. That I'll believe. All right. So let's go on with the rest of our survey. So the rest of this presentation, almost everything else I'm going to do is just one giant set of survey questions that we're going to spend time talking about. So thank you for demonstration. Whoever's on top of this, no thanks. Okay. So the question is, now, Norm, there's a question. What is your greatest test and measurement software development challenge today? No thanks is a valid response. Edit time and load time performance and stability of the LabVIEW editor. What? Oh. Load time performance. All right. There were several sessions today that talked about load time performance. Talk to me about stability of the editor. Darren's just going to... Yeah, the PPL... I don't know too much about PPL corruption issues, but I got a lot of issues with PPLs. The build dependency order that Alan was just talking about, it's a big one. Right.
Don't look at me, I'm in sales.
Okay. You're in sales. Distribution and licensing. Okay. Okay. A lot of honesty here. worried that LabVIEW might die someday. Well, for what it's worth, from NI's perspective, LabVIEW's not going to die. But there's lots of other software, like that was part of the message yesterday, and I want to make sure that everybody hears that, of like the world, and I stopped looking at the world from everything is LabVIEW. And we're looking at the world from a realistic standpoint, which is we're building a lot of test systems. LabVIEW is a really great tool for being able to interact with those test systems, but it's not the only tool. Measuring infinity. Okay, well. Stable tools for sharing between targets. Sharing between OS targets or sharing between embedded targets? What do you... Sharing between the OSs? Okay. Between the target. Okay. We're going to need people with microphones roving around because I'm not going to be able to hear anybody in the back. Error 42. Is that the like generic error that when LabVIEW doesn't know what your error is? Okay. Fast image processing, machine vision, and AI. Okay. Terrible NI website. Thank you for throwing something out there. You know, there is quite a change to the website coming. Again, yes, always. Actually, that one's under constant state of evaluation of can we do it better. I think everybody in this room's answer is currently yes. So we'll keep working on it. Working more naturally with web interfaces. Well, I agree with that. I'd love to see everybody in the room working with web interfaces. It's one of pain, especially for systems that are intentionally isolated for security purposes. Yeah. Regional sales support. Well, NI hardware performance specs that only work in certain configurations. Is that Max related, channel configuration related? What's the hardware configurations only work in specific situations comment? Okay, the interactive dialogue part of this is failing right now. So integration with Git tools, that's a whole category for us. So that's one that I want to see improve. And if this room hasn't heard it before, one of the reasons that you can count on pieces of that at least improving over time is NI is also adopting Git as its primary source code for all of its development. So we're having to go through a lot of the same challenges that you guys are going through with that right now. So you'll see things improve there, at least from certain perspectives as we identify them as things that we have to fix. And the rest of it, then I rely on you to tell me where are the workflows that we really need to go look at. Because Git is a different workflow than what we're used to, and certain things that were okay to be difficult before are no longer okay. Downgrading packages in NIPM. Okay, I love that comment. That's definitely related to the installer's question from earlier. That is a specific workflow that we've added into NIPM. Some of the problems are LabVIEW doesn't always expose everything that we've introduced as an NIPM functionality. Assistant framework technical support. Well, there are only a limited number of people who actually understand how to really do assistant framework well. That is a problem. Slow technical support responses. Brian. Only 73 days. Come on. There's like 5 of them in the room. You're going to get stoned later. It's fine. Telling customers to reinstall their entire OS because of installing a new NI package or driver. All right. Well, I can't tell you the number of support requests. So I've done support before, just for everybody who wants to know my history. I started at an AE with Darren way back in the day. I can't tell you the number of support requests that have been fixed by reinstalling your OS because your OS is the thing that's jacked up. It has nothing to do with NI. Your OS is jacked up. Having said that, yes, the right response to I have a problem. Okay, first thing you should do is reinstall the OS. No, that's not the right thing to do. But comparing merging, with SEC merge conflicts. All right, so the diff part of LabVIEW is stuff that we know we can make improvements on. Merge is actually a pretty hard problem. And for people who would really like to get into fabulously complex algorithm design, we would love your help. All right, I'm going to move on to the next question just because there's like 30 of these and we can't spend forever on any one question. All right, LabVIEW and XG capabilities that you'd like to see incorporated back into LabVIEW. The other category is down here at the bottom. If you can't read it on your interface, I'll read them all off. But you can. Cry me a river. So here's why I did it. This is intentional because I can change how this question works. When I ask, which of these do you want? And everybody says, all of them, that doesn't help. When I force you to pick one and 80% of you pick the same one, that's super useful. Okay? So no matter how many people I throw at a problem, I can't do everything. It's a plain reality. I talked to you guys yesterday about the importance of being able to focus. These questions are designed to help us focus. No matter how many I let you pick, you'd want to pick more, so you get to pick one. Nah. My question, I get to ask it the way I want. Vector-based UI. So I love seeing what you guys really want to be working on. All of you really want Zoom. All right, so let's talk about that one because it'll come up later. I've learned to break this one up into two parts. Are you actually talking about the editor and its ability to magnify and do things? Or are you talking about the controls themselves and the fact that their scalability on high-resolution monitors kind of sucks right now? Yeah, the user interface components. Yeah. Okay. All right. So I feel like we're going to end up having an entire conference discussion, whether that's at the GLA or at some other point in time, specifically on this topic. Because I'd love to talk about other ways that we can design the user interface that isn't just replace all of the controls that we have right now, well, with the exception of like maybe use a third-party library that does it better, because those exist today. And maybe they're web-based controls or maybe they're something else. But I'd like to get better understanding of the workflows that you guys are working on for this one. Yes, Norm?
I was going to say, when you put up their vector,
you put up their vector-based UI, and I know that in my brain and maybe other people's, and that's maybe why it's ranked so high, is because we're like anything UI-based. It's not necessarily about it being vector-based, right? It's kind of it's UI-based improvements. I don't know if that's what everybody kind of took that answer that is like. Is it specific about being?
So remember that the
vector-based?
context of the question is LabVIEW NXG. LabVIEw NXG used vector-based UIs. That was the improvement category that we're looking at. I will obviously interpret this as improve the user interface and the ability to create professional user interfaces.
I have a 4.
Did you turn the mic off?
Sorry,
Ronnie?
yeah. I have a question on the text-based file format because my understanding, so what I would be after there is something that's easier to diff and merge and all that, but that having a text-based file format as you were putting it up there and they had it in NXG did not solve that problem. Am I correct in that, Stephen?
Yeah, so I can talk about this one ad nauseum. The idea, well, NXG wasn't finished, right? When we stopped doing it, it wasn't finished. The idea with it was to get it to a point where you could actually do diff and merge on a text-based file, and LabVIEW would simply re-render the VI when you loaded that text-based file into memory. So that was the idea. We didn't actually get that far, right? So if you ever tried to modify that text-based file outside of the editor, LabVIEW would no longer be able to load the VI. So text-based file format, we expected to get this dialogue on. Stephen showed me a very promising tool yesterday that I'd like to explore a little bit. I will tell you by default, like this, infinitely more likely for us to actually be able to achieve. I'm glad to see it as number one. This, really, really, really difficult for us to do, which is one of the reasons why when we designed LabVIEW NXG, we said, hey, if we really want to solve this problem, we should probably redo how we did VIs because they have this giant binary component in them today. And extracting that and making LabVIEW not need that binary component, fundamentally different. You're talking about a different file format. It's really hard for us to do. Jim?
So, are you talking about like the compile typing the binary format or the other stuff in the source?
I'm just talking about if you want to save a VI for it to be in a format that is saved on disk as text that you could diff and merge, and then the editor being able to know what the heck you did to it. It's all of it. I mean, I can't separate the two parts of the question that you asked because right now it's just a VI. It has binary components to it. Yeah.
So I think just to kind of be a little bit clearer, I think when a lot of us are looking at that list up there, we're thinking about things that we want to have in LabVIEW. But I think I might not speak only for myself when I say we don't want exactly what NXG had for any of those things. Like for the vector-based UI, like I don't want what NXG had. I didn't think it worked hardly at all. So yeah, maybe we want it, but don't just grab what they had and try to roll it in.
This is a great conversation from last night that I got to make sure I recover for everybody. So thank you for giving me the opportunity. For everybody in Austin, his comment was, even though you've branded this as which NXG capabilities you want, please don't make that be, go take exactly what was in LabVIEW NXG and put it into LabVIEW, because that's not actually what we want. And I will tell you that would be impossible anyway. They were completely different code bases. I can not literally take the code from LabVIEW NXG and put it into LabVIEW, which is why when we ask you for a list like this, what we're actually asking you for is how much of what we learned how to do in LabVIEW and XG do you need us to rebuild and do in LabVIEW in some different way? It is not, none of these features are possible to do as take the code that was in NXG, put it into LabVIEW and recompile and everything's gonna magically work. Yeah, Steven's got a response.
Just a little point on that. The information stored in the two files is also fundamentally different. So it's not even an option just to take the file format. What information we have to record is different. So that, I think your concern was more the content than the code porting. Neither one is necessarily going to happen. So we're going to have to rethink it one way or the other.
And then Matthew or Supriya, is anybody from Austin wanting to jump in here to stop me before I run off a cliff? Okay.
So I'm sorry, are we saying UI as in the IDE, what I see as a developer, or what I can create for customers? The vector I see as an advantage to that. As teaching students, having a 1 pixel wide border on a cluster for people to learn how to use the mouse is really, really hard for new LabVIEW users. So I would say, you know, the vector graphics engine enables a lot of things, having the properties page, some of those things. I mean, and the window clutter that we just inherently accept with LabVIEW mainstream is hard for new users. And that IDE had some value. I didn't love everything about it, but there are a lot of elements that had some value in the IDE.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, because one of the things that I typically find when I ask this question, when you're looking at the IDE, the window clutter was a big one. That was a fundamental thing that we shifted to. So instead of generating infinite number of windows across your entire Windows desktop, NXG docked everything into the interface and you simply had Windows tabs. So it had a much cleaner look and feel to the editor. And there's a lot of people who actually like that interface. That's a lot more common in other compiler editor windows that you're using today. So I was talking about both. So thank you for bringing that up. But when later on there's a question where we'll actually pull those two things apart of the user interface ability from the editor's interface, and they could both use some work.
Could I ask a follow-up?
Sure.
That goes to your point about the Linux replacement for Macs. I had always assumed that System Designer was the replacement for Macs.
Yeah.
What's the path there?
Yeah, so System Designer is a different entity than Mac. So that Linux-based configuration utility editor, hardware configuration utility that I talked about, that's the replacement for Mac. System Designer actually allows me to build up what the system is, how its channels are related to each other, and it's a different interface. That one, System Designer, if you paid attention to the session yesterday, our current intention is to make that one a standalone utility like we did with the GWeb development software. So you'll be seeing that one, but it won't actually appear in LabVIEW, but as a companion product that you use with LabVIEW. Okay, one more. Hope.
Well, I was just kind of surprised that Unicode support didn't get more votes. So I was just going to bring it up. But like, to me, the idea of not being able to use Unicode in like a program that I'm using in the year 2021, it's crazy. Like, it should definitely support Unicode. It's the way of the future.
Yes. All right. So Hope brings up an excellent point, and I'm going to bring it up now, and then you're going to see it again in a future question because this Unicode idea comes up a lot. All right, on a one-off conversation, if you're in the middle of doing a project and you suddenly find I need to translate this thing and you're cursing at LabVIEW for its horrible ability to not allow you to use Unicode, it's super important that we add Unicode, right? Everybody raise your hand? Yeah. Okay, now, you do this kind of survey, and we've done this one at massive scales, and compared to all this other stuff that we'd also like to see, Unicode ends up down here almost all the time. Why? What are you doing today that you don't have Unicode? You've worked around it. That's the problem. You found ways to work around it. When it was important, you had to do something with Unicode support in order to get the localization. So when a push comes to shove, and I've got to pick what things we have to work on, you're telling me these things are problems we can't work around, and they're super important, and you got to fix them. So we're going to do that. And we get down here to Unicode, and our whole group looks at it and says, oh my God, I can't believe it's 2021, and we can't support Unicode in this programming language. We all say that. Guess what? Christina and I were like, our dev team, we're figuring out how to do the Unicode support. So we're gonna work on this and improve it over time, but we're also gonna put a lot more energy on these other things because that's what's massively important. Remember yesterday I told you we gotta learn how to focus. This is part of learning how to focus. You're all participating in this right now, and I'm intentionally showing you why it plays out the way it does.
So with respect to Unicode, I think possibly one of the larger use cases is front panel localization.
Yep.
Right. And so Unicode is a means to that end. And as you were saying, there are a lot of solutions. And I think it might be nice if, because that requires like so many hooks into LabVIEW, if that were something that, and I were kind of more actively either like supporting a solution for localization or enabling things that would allow other people to do it more easily.
I agree with your comment, Jim. I mean, it's very intentional that it's on this list. Too many negatives. Sorry, I was trying to frame the sentence. It's important that this is on the list, but I need you to also see why it's not the thing that we end up working on. And so the way we're going to choose to work, this one in particular, the way we're going to choose to work on is we're going to go, like what Jim said, we're going to find specific workflows that we can improve as a base case to start with, and then we're going to keep improving it over time until it's at least to the point where, like, at least for your front panel design, it's easy enough for you to use Unicode to translate everything that's on your front panel. There's also work that we could do inside the editor, which would also be impactful for a large number of you, but we admit that the front panel is probably the place where we need to make the improvements first. Yeah, Brian.
I think I was just going to echo what you just said. And UNXG, as I understood it, was Unicode.
It's all Unicode, 100%.
Whereas I don't think that's necessarily what we need to solve some of these problems.
Yeah.
And so some acknowledgement of Unicode to like be able to progress through strings and so on, and front panel display, that maybe sufficient.
For everybody who couldn't hear that because he didn't have a microphone, he was simply acknowledging that it's important to to fix certain workflows first, and then be able to look at other ways that we could expand it. And in LabVIEW and XG, we had the benefit of, since we started over, right? So this is how you fall into the trap. Since we started over, we just said, look, everything should have been designed with Unicode. That wasn't really the mindset when we started LabVIEW, just so you're all clear on when we started LabVIEW, right? But LabVIEW and XG, yeah, so when we start from the beginning, there was only one string type. It was all Unicode throughout the whole thing. It's marvelous. However, when we built LabVIEW, if you come and talk to Steven or Darren and I later, we'll explain to you exactly how many string types there are in LabVIEW all across the editor, and it's ridiculous. And none of them are Unicode, by the way. Okay, let's move on to happier things. All right, software development tools or languages that your primary tool today. Once again, you can only pick one. How am I doing on time? Oh, I'm definitely screwed on time. Oh well. All right, we're gonna move faster. Yeah, I hope you're done because I'm moving on to the next question. Next. Get faster at this because I'm gonna go. All right, software dev tools that you expect to be your primary tool or language in the next 3 to 5 years. Right, so the main thing that we're looking for here and why I share these results, like this is an intentional setup. Python's a real thing. I mean, even if we didn't want to acknowledge reality, it doesn't matter. You're going to be using Python, you're going to be using C#, and we have to make sure that the tools that you've built with LabVIEW and what you want to build with LabVIEW in the future works well with those tools. That's what we're showing here. All right, 3 to 5 years from now, how much of your day-to-day software usage, this does not necessarily need to be just the software development you're doing, but just how much usage is going to be done through a browser as opposed to a desktop application. Okay, so the reason I asked this question, in addition to, we built the G-Web development software, we've asked this question for almost 6 years now at conferences just like this one. When we started the conferences, where did this bar start out? 6 years ago. None of my software usage is done. Browser is used for like Google. That's what I do with browser and play games. Those two things. Now, you're looking at where we are today and where we'll be in 3 to 5 years. This is a super common graph to see, and in different industries, when we ask this question, we even get higher than that, so you can see the trend. And because we can see the trend, we're going to build tools that actually talk to that trend. All right, so this is just a usage question. How many of you have used the GWeb development software, which prior to January was known as the LabVIEW NXG web module? Haven't had a chance to try it. Makes me very sad. I want to see this graph change over time a lot. Brian's pointed out a lot of reasons why we haven't seen that trend yet, so we'll go fix those first, and then I'll ask this question again. All right. Okay, this is actually an important question. So, in terms of LabVIEW investment, we picked a whole bunch of categories, multiple of which have been talked about ad nauseum in lots of people's presentations today. And I'd like you to, this one is a ranking question, so you don't get to just pick one. You get to actually put this in a rank. So the previous question wasn't because the software is not capable of it, it's because I was intentionally screwing with you. And for those of you who are into psychology theory, yes, this page, when it comes up, is different for everybody. These are not in a particular order. So you are going to rank in a different order than everybody else in the room. When you bring up the page by default, the order that it's in is random for everyone. Sorry, I said that really poorly. Sorry. It's actually really not that bad. I have too many words on here, so it's horrible because of what I did. You can blame me mostly for that one. Unless, of course, you really hated the UI for like everything else that we did, and then, then you can blame the website, I guess. But this one is particularly bad just because there's so many words. There are like 18 different options, and they all have a lot of words, and that made it hard. All right, so you can see here, this is the question I was talking about. We actually split out what we meant from the user interface so that we called them out as two different things, and you can rank them against each other. And we'll give you 10 more seconds to complete your answers. Sorry. Move faster. I know. Well, if they do that, we'll get some interesting results, but sure, they could. Jim's busy taking pictures of my graph. It's still changing. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Oh, locked. Lock it. There. Now you can't change anymore. Ha. All right. So, looking at the top two things, they are both the editor UI. What a fun group you are. Okay. So you want us to really work on that user interface. I can honestly tell you that in the like 30 times that I've done this survey, that's the first time I've ended up with that one on both the top answers. So congratulations on being unique. Now the continuous integration workflows and the work on package management being right below that, and then the PPLs being the next closest thing in the list, those three I see very frequently in the top of the list. And the user interface stuff usually shows up in the top 5, though not necessarily the top 2. So now in terms of looking at things that we're working on in the future, the first question people always ask me of this one is, are you just going to take the top one and only work on that? Okay, I've got a pretty big dev team. So no, we're going to work on a couple of them, but we won't be able to work on all of them. Now, if I was a betting person and I kind of looked at graphs like this, there's logical places where I'm going to draw lines of, here's what we're going to work on first. Those 4. Here's what we work on next, these 3, but I don't have to make that choice. Remember what I told you yesterday. We're done doing forecasting of what I'm going to do for the next year, the next 2 years. We don't do stuff like that. I look at what I'm going to do next quarter. So next quarter, we're going to start working on workflows that are probably related to one of the top 4 things in this list, because very common when I do this survey, those 4 are always in the top 5, always. So right now I can tell you that those are important workflows for us to go work on. Yeah, Jim's asking a really complicated question about the user editor. The first thing that's on the line item here, so I'm simply going to explain what that line item means because he was asking for clarification. The editor UI, I'm talking about the LabVIEW editor interface. So what from panel and the block diagram and the editor itself. And the project and app builder and all of the interfaces that go with that. So that's the editor. That second line, and I put some generic stuff in here that typically comes up, which was like how we handle like user interface rendering on current modern display devices, because that's kind of a sucky thing right now. How well we integrate with the GWeb development software, some type of zoom, and a refreshed look and feel of the editor in general. Right? So those things typically fall into that category. The next category is then just talking about the ability to create professional user interfaces because it's specific to what you're doing with the UI. 10 minutes. Okay, next. Anybody want to talk more about this one? Sam.
Just real quick, I think to Jim's point, I think aside from like just a refresh, I think better visibility into some of the class diagrams and hierarchy and some of that type of stuff. Better, like Alan was talking about dependencies, like something that would show us cyclical dependencies and things like that would be very useful.
I will tell you that I would consider that a separate entity, and I would have answered that in the something else category, which then I would have asked this next question of, I skipped it. Damn it. I knew I was going to run low on time, so I skipped something else. There was supposed to be something, like if you filled something else in there before, tell us what the something else should have been. Sam, can you email me that one? Sure. Thank you. Because that's a good something else for us to go look at. All right, please rate the following potential options that could be included in software purchases in the future in order for the most impactful or important to you and to the least impactful. Sam, I intentionally put a part in here for you. Uh-huh. That's fun. See, you guys don't care about containers. I don't know what to tell you. Oh, see, spoke too soon. Changes a lot in like 2 seconds. Yeah, that's true. People are just trying to prove me wrong now, right? It's a lot of hecklers in the back. Yeah, hecklers are in the front. You're right, Brian. Thanks. Okay, gonna lock this one too before I get a hook and pulled right off the stage. All right, so containers, Docker, this kind of imaging software, that one we've seen before. Successful consulting, so or some sort of consulting credits, which is a more proactive approach as opposed to looking at the TSCs and the support organization's kind of reactive approach. Yes. Yeah. Okay, Alan.
So I have to confess that I supported customer services and consulting services credits because I'm a consultant. And so that's going to be audience dependent, because if you have a lot of consultants who are looking at, hey, I can support NI on this sort of thing, that potentially goes to my bottom line. So I thought I should, and probably a few other folks in this room. So
is this a really important room to bring that point up in? I'll just state that and then not add any color.
Yeah, adding color.
I'm not adding any color. Purchases, including additional NI software at the same price. I figured if we had left out the at the same price part, that part might not have gone over as well. And then online data storage options. So this thing is, we're looking for like how we leverage the cloud. It comes up all the time of like, hey, we've got these massive test systems. I need to be able to store data. Are you looking for places to store the data, or is that really just, are you handled? So that's why we ask this type of question. All right. Oh, see, here's the other question. Wow, the slides got out of order. Okay, this was meant for the prior question of like, if you selected other in that list and there was something other than what I had put in the prioritization of features that we should be investing in, what was the other supposed to be? I'll fix the order later, but I'll remember that I screwed it up when I look at the results. As much NI software as possible goes in the community edition. Okay. Class UML. Yeah, UML editor comes up a lot. We're going to talk about this. ID better management when dealing with many front panels and block diagrams. Is that from a clutter standpoint or performance standpoint or both? Clutter mostly, okay. There, thank you, Sam. Class visualization, dependency management, refactoring. Maybe that was Jim. Whoever put that one in there. Thank you. I got 5 minutes. If you're typing, type quickly, or just like put a hanging Chad in there. See, some of you knew what the joke was. There's some people in the back going, I don't know what that is. It's a hanging Chad. It's good. It's good. Okay, moving on. You were too slow? Okay. All right. If you don't renew SSP today, would any of the potential features that you just saw, see, remember that the questions got out of order, so this is now asking about the SSP question that I asked before. That's what I get for not reviewing the order of the slides carefully. Those things that we said were optional potential things in the future. If you're not renewing SSP today, would they be enough to say, hey, yes, I want to renew SSP to get them? It's a yes, no question, people. 2 seconds. 1. Too late. Okay. All right, so this question is related to the last one, which says, if you renew your SSP today, rank the following reasons why you renew. These are all benefits today of the SSP renewal. So if you're renewing SSP today, help us understand what you're actually getting value out of the SSP for. Brian.
For those of us who are partners and use the partner software, do you want us to answer it the same way? Or just
Yeah, because the partner program includes SSP, right, Matthew, please? Okay, same benefits. So yes, answer it anyway. Answer it as though you were renewing SSP because the partner program includes SSP. But thank you for asking the question, Brian. Five, four, three, two, one. Wow. I'm sorry, I badly mistimed how long some of these questions would go on for our discussion. It's entirely on me. All right, so you guys all brought this point up earlier. So I wanted to ask the question. I actually added this while you were doing your presentations. Like, how many versions of LabVIEW do you typically have installed on your computers? That's not, I have one computer that has like 9 versions of LabVIEW installed on it, but most of my computers only have one. I'm asking about the typical case. Yeah. No. In the case of VMs, I'm treating each VM as its own machine. How many versions of LabVIEW do you have on one instance of an OS, whatever you count that as, VMs or physical?
So you're asking about how many are total.
Yes, on the same image, how many versions of LabVIEW do you have?
Do you discriminate between 32 and 64 bit?
Brian's asking a really trolly question about the differences between 32 and 64-bit. I'm going to treat them as one, even though they're not.
And is this for like compatibility issues? Like if people upgrade to 2022, but you can't have 2019 installed because it removed something? Is that
If I
kind of
had
what we're
more
talking
than
about?
2 minutes, Jim, I would get into this fun conversation.
No, I
of
just
what
want a yes or no.
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
There's a fun conversation that I want to have related to this, and we can't have it because I'm going to get hooked off the stage, and you have other things that you need to be doing today. So later, maybe at the GLA, I'll have this fun dialogue with you guys about whether it's useful to actually be able to have multiple versions of LabVIEW on the same machine, or whether that's really just a big pain in the ass and we should stop doing it.
But I think there's another reason of why do we have multiple versions on the same machine too?
Which should be a conversation, and we don't have time for it. All right, what other types of software do you need for your test and measurement systems? This is just a general question. We are not asking a question as whether NI makes these or not. That's irrelevant. This question is just what other types of software do you need for when you're building test and measurement systems? 3, 2, 1. Done. All right. So the reason I needed to get to the Q&A part is I wanted to do two things. Sam had this great idea. I went and found an app to generate a QR code for this one. This is the same one as yesterday. I actually have 3 prizes that we're giving away because what they shipped to me in the other one was a swag bag filled with NI stuff. It's a backpack. It's got a cooler in it. It's got some sunglasses. I don't remember what else is in there. I think there was a pair of socks. That was fun. And some drinking straws and something else. I don't remember. And then there are these 2 MyRio devices just to prove that I actually have them. I will be giving them out. So make sure you have filled this out. If you manage to find a way to enter it multiple times, I will dedupe it. If you filled it out yesterday, you do not need to fill it out again, but I wasn't sure that everybody got a report, so I wanted to throw it up here one more time. But I'm just warning everybody that if you filled it out yesterday and you want to try to sneak in there and save it again, I'm going to dedupe it before I run the algorithm to generate my random numbers.
I can schedule a visit with you?
Yes, you can. It's my brain, so I'm going to go with pretty smart. Ha 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 ha. Okay, and then this is a survey question which is fully unique for today's session. So the last part of this is the same. It's the same survey as yesterday, but it's for today's session. So it's a whole different interface. Please do fill this one out twice. Well, actually, fill this one out, but it's different from the one you filled out yesterday. Haha. And this is my last question, so you can hook me off the stage anytime you want. I'm not kidding because it'll keep running even after I unplug. So if you need the next presenter to get up here, we should go ahead and do that. It's cute. All right. Thank you, everybody, for your time. I appreciate it. And I will be staying like the rest of the NI team that's not Nancy, who had to leave. We are all here tonight. So if you want to try to find us and carry on additional conversations, we're here for that.
All right. Thanks very much, Eric.